The trail stretched on for
my
miles, dusty,
God.
quiet, unforgiving. And yet, the foal wouldn't turn back. He was small, too small, ribs faintly visible beneath a dull coat, legs trembling with every step. Any seasoned rancher would have expected him to give up within minutes. But this one didn't. He followed, not close enough to touch, not far enough to disappear. Just there. Step after step got it first. The rancher thought it was instinct, or hunger, or maybe plain stubbornness. But as the miles passed, something felt wrong. The foal wasn't asking for food. He wasn't calling out. He wasn't afraid. Instead, he kept glancing back down the trail again and again, as if something unseen was pulling at him. As if leaving that stretch of land behind meant losing something forever. And when the rancher finally stopped, when he followed the foal's gaze back to the place they'd already passed, what he uncovered didn't just explain the foal's behavior, it broke him. Because some bonds don't fade with distance, and some stories don't reveal themselves until you're brave enough to look back. If stories like this move you, stories from the raw heart of the Wild West, go ahead and like this video. It truly helps more than you think. Subscribe to Wild Stories for real ranch life stories, untold horse legends, and moments that stay with you long after the trail ends. And if this story touches you, share it with someone who'd feel it too. The sun was already leaning west when the rancher first noticed him. Out on that stretch of trail, you learned to read movement the way sailors read water. Anything that didn't belong stood out. A shadow where there shouldn't be one. A rhythm that didn't match the land. And there, just beyond the bend, where sagebrush thinned into open dust, was a foal. Not running, not hiding, just standing. At first glance, the rancher thought the little horse might bolt the moment he drew closer. Most would. Wild blood ran deep out here, even in the young ones. But this foal didn't flee. He shifted his weight, legs shaking slightly, ears flicking back and forth like he was listening to something no one else could hear. The rancher slowed his horse. Instinctively. He'd been riding trails like this for over 20 years, checking fences, moving cattle, keeping an eye on land most folks only ever saw from a distance. He'd seen abandoned animals before, injured ones too. But something about this foal felt different, too quiet. Too thin. As the distance closed, the details sharpened. The foal's coat was dull, dust-matted, lacking the shine of good pasture and strong milk. His ribs weren't sharply visible, but they whispered of missed meals. One front leg favored the ground just enough to notice. Nothing dramatic, just a subtle hesitation each time it landed. "You lost, little one?" The rancher muttered under his breath. The foal lifted his head. Dark eyes met the rancher's for a brief second, long enough to register awareness, not fear. Then, without a sound, the foal turned and began walking down the trail. Not away. Ahead. The rancher frowned. He nudged his horse forward, half expecting the foal to veer off into the brush. But the foal stayed on the path, hooves falling into old tracks, pressed into the dust, some fresh, some days old. He walked with purpose, slow but steady, as if the trail itself was telling him where to go. That's when the rancher realized something unsettling. The foal wasn't wandering. He was following. Mile 1 passed quietly. Wind brushed over the plains, carrying the dry scent of grass and sun-warmed earth. The rancher kept a careful distance, not wanting to spook the foal, but close enough to intervene if those shaky legs gave out. Mile 2 brought more questions. The foal never once looked toward the rancher's saddlebags, never sniffed for food, never cried out. Instead, every so often, he glanced back down the trail behind him. Just a quick look, then forward again. What was he checking for? By the 3rd mile, concern had replaced curiosity. No Murray appeared. No answering call echoed across the land. A foal this young shouldn't have been alone, not this far from water, not this deep into open range. And yet, here he was, walking like he had somewhere to be. The rancher finally spoke again, softer this time. Where you headed, huh? The foal stopped. For the first time since they'd started moving, he halted completely. Dust settled around his hooves. His ears turned back toward the rancher, then forward again. Slowly, he angled his body not toward the man, but back toward the trail they'd already traveled. He stared. Longer this time, the rancher followed the foal's gaze. The path behind them looked no different than any other dust, scattered stones, faint hoof marks, weaving in and out of cattle tracks. Nothing obvious. Nothing alarming. And yet the foal didn't move. That's when the rancher noticed the tension running through the small body. Not panic, not pain, something heavier. Something almost deliberate, like leaving that place behind wasn't an option. You waiting on someone? The rancher asked, the words coming out before he could stop them. The foal didn't answer. Of course he didn't, but he took one hesitant step back down the trail, then another. As if correcting a mistake, the rancher felt a tightness in his chest he couldn't quite explain. Against his better judgment, he turned his horse around. They walked back together, slow and quiet. The foal's steps grew steadier as they retraced the path. That limp didn't disappear, but it seemed less pronounced, like the foal had found a rhythm he trusted after a few hundred yards. The foal stopped again. This time, the rancher saw it, a disturbed patch of ground just off the trail. The dust there was darker, pressed down in a way that suggested weight. Hoof marks circled the airy adult hooves. Many of them. The rancher dismounted. Years of experience told him to stay cautious. Out here, signs like that could mean anything. A struggle, a rest, a loss.
He approached slowly, boots crunching softly against the dirt. The foal stayed back, watching, waiting. The rancher crouched, brushing aside loose dust with his hand. Beneath it, the earth was packed hard, almost polished. There were drag marks too, shallow but unmistakable. His stomach sank. This wasn't just a resting spot. He stood and scanned the horizon, heart thudding harder now. No buzzards circled overhead. No fresh scent carried on the breeze. Whatever had happened here hadn't drawn attention. Not yet. Behind him, the foal let out a soft sound. Not a whinny, not a cry. Just a low, breathy noise that carried more weight than volume ever could. The rancher turned. The foal had stepped closer now, head lowered, eyes fixed on the disturbed ground. He didn't touch it, didn't sniff, just stood there, still as stone. That was the moment the rancher understood something that stopped him cold. This trail wasn't where the foal was going. It was where he was coming from. And whatever had been here, whoever had been here, was the reason that frail little body had refused to move on. The wind shifted, carrying a chill despite the sun. The rancher swallowed hard. Out here, the West taught you many things: how to survive, how to endure, how to let go. But standing there, watching that foal refuse to abandon what the trail held behind him, the rancher had a sinking feeling this lesson would be different. Some stories didn't begin at the start of the trail. Some waited for you to turn back. The rancher didn't move right away. He stayed there, boots planted in the dirt, eyes locked on the disturbed ground, as if it might speak if he gave it enough time. Out here, silence often carried more truth than words. And this silence felt heavy, pressed down the same way the earth had been. The foal shifted behind him, not impatient, not restless, just present, like he understood this pause mattered. The rancher finally straightened and took a slow breath. "All right," he murmured, more to himself than the horse. "Let's see what you're trying to tell me." He began walking the perimeter of the area, careful not to trample what little evidence remained. Years of ranch life had taught him how to read the ground the way some men read ledgers. Every scuff, every drag mark, every broken stem of grass told a piece of a larger story, if you were willing to listen. The adult hoof prints were clearer now. A mare, most likely. The size fit. The stride pattern, too. Her steps had been uneven toward the end, digging deeper on one side. Not a stumble from panic. Fatigue. The rancher exhaled slowly through his nose. "She was tired," he said quietly. The foal lifted his head at the sound of the voice, ears pricking forward. He took a step closer, then stopped, as if unsure how much nearness was allowed. The rancher followed the trail outward, away from the main path. A few yards in, the brush thinned, and there it was again, another pressed-down patch of earth. Smaller this time. Shorter rest. Then another. Stops. Many of them. This mare hadn't collapsed all at once. She tried to keep going. The rancher's jaw tightened. Predators would have left clearer signs. Torn earth. Scattered tracks. Blood. But this place held none of that. What it held instead was exhaustion. The quiet kind that doesn't make noise until it's too late. He crouched near one of the resting spots, fingers grazing the dirt. It was dry now, but darker underneath. The sun hadn't fully erased what had happened here. Not yet. Behind him, the foal let out that same low sound again. The rancher turned slowly. "You stayed with her," he said, not as a question. The foal didn't move. His eyes stayed on the ground, fixed on the invisible memory laid into the soil. He took one tentative step forward, then another, until he stood just at the edge of the resting place. Still, he didn't touch it, almost like he was afraid to. The rancher felt something twist in his chest. He'd seen loyalty before, in dogs, in horses, even in men. But this was different. This was a foal too young to understand loss, yet somehow refusing to abandon it. He rose and scanned the horizon again. No water source nearby. No shelter. No reason for a mare in poor condition to be this far out, unless she was being pushed by something stronger than sense. "Why'd you come this way?" he murmured. The wind offered no answer, but the trail did. He followed it farther back now, the foal shadowing him without being asked. Every few yards, the signs repeated themselves, short stops, uneven strides, deeper hoof impressions. The pattern told a clear story. The mare had been slowing long before she reached this point. Then the rancher noticed something else. Human tracks. Faint. Old. But there. Boot prints crossed the trail at an angle, heading toward the hills. They didn't linger. Didn't stop. Whoever made them hadn't noticed, or hadn't cared. What was happening just a few yards away? The rancher clenched his hands. Out here, indifference could be just as deadly as hunger. He followed the trail another half-mile, then stopped. There it was. The final place. The ground here was pressed deeper than anywhere else, the dust packed so tightly it looked almost smooth. Nearby brush was bent, snapped under weight. The mare hadn't gotten up from this one. The rancher removed his hat without realizing he'd done it. He didn't rush forward. Didn't need to. The absence said enough. The foal approached this time without hesitation. Step by step, he walked straight to the edge of the spot and lowered his head. His nose hovered inches above the dirt, trembling slightly. He didn't touch it, just breathed. The rancher felt his throat tighten. "So that's why," he whispered. This wasn't a trail the foal refused to leave. It was a grave he didn't understand how to walk away from. The foal shifted his weight, favoring that front leg again. Up close, the injury was easier to see now, a swollen joint, old enough to have stiffened but not healed. The mare must have slowed for him, adjusted her pace, taken the burden onto herself, and it had cost her everything. The rancher knelt beside the foal, careful, slow. He didn't reach out right away. Trust wasn't something you took. It was something you earned. "You didn't know what to do, did you?" he said softly. "You just stayed." The foal flicked an ear, but didn't pull away. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The land stretched out around them, wide and indifferent, just as it always had. Life went on out here, whether you were ready or not. But the rancher knew something had shifted. He could turn back now, lead the foal to water, to safety, pretend this was just another sad thing the range had swallowed whole. Or he could finish reading the story the dust had started telling him. He stood slowly, eyes tracing the ground one last time. The trail didn't end here. It continued, carrying questions with it, and answers he wasn't sure he wanted. The rancher looked down at the foal. "Come on," he said gently. "Let's do this right." The foal hesitated just a second, then took a step toward him, not away from the past, but forward at last. They didn't leave right away. The rancher led his horse a short distance off the trail and tied the reins loosely to a scrubby mesquite. He wanted the animal close, but not crowding the foal. Some moments needed space to breathe. Others needed stillness. The foal stayed where he was, standing at the edge of that final resting place. His head was lowered now, ears slack, as if the long fight that had carried him this far was finally beginning to ebb. The rancher returned slowly, kneeling again. This time he reached out. His hand hovered inches from the foal's neck. He paused, watching for any sign of fear. There was none, only exhaustion. When his fingers finally made contact, the foal flinched, not away but into the touch. Leaned just enough to say he'd been waiting for it. The rancher swallowed hard. "Easy now," he whispered. He ran his hand gently along the foal's shoulder, feeling the tension there, the heat in the injured joint. Old injury, untreated. The mare had been compensating for it. No doubt about that now. The rancher straightened and looked back at the ground. Something still didn't sit right. A mare didn't just wander this far with a hurt foal unless she believed there was something ahead worth reaching. Water, shelter, help, or memory. He scanned the land again, this time slower, more deliberate. And then he saw it. A faint line, barely visible in the grass. A secondary trail, almost erased by time. Not cattle, not wild horse. Human-made. An old cut, leading toward a rise in the land where the hills folded into one another. The rancher felt a chill creep up his spine. This wasn't just open range. This was forgotten ground. He followed the faint trail uphill, the foal watching him go. After a few steps, the foal limped forward and followed, staying close now. Closer than before. The climb wasn't steep, but it was long. The wind picked up as they rose, carrying the smell of stone and old wood. The rancher's heart began to beat faster, not from exertion, but recognition. He'd seen places like this before, places people walked away from. The structure revealed itself slowly. First, a broken fence post jutting from the earth, silvered with age. Then another, and then, half hidden by brush and time, a low, collapsed roofline. The rancher stopped. An old homestead, long abandoned, maybe decades, maybe longer. The foal halted beside him, ears forward now, eyes bright in a way they hadn't been before. He let out a soft sound, not sorrow this time, but something closer to recognition. "You've been here before," the rancher murmured. He approached the remains carefully. The building had once been a small barn or shelter, no more than 4 walls and a roof meant to keep weather off livestock. Now it sagged under its own history. Boards warped, nails rusted. The door hung crooked, barely attached. Inside, the air was cooler. The rancher stepped in first, boots crunching over dry debris. The smell hit him immediately. Old hay, dust, and something else faint but unmistakable. Horse. Not recent, but not ancient either. He knelt and brushed aside a layer of dirt near the wall. Beneath it lay the remains of a feed trough, split down the middle. Nearby, a rusted bucket tipped on its side. And in the corner, pressed into the dirt like a shadow, hoof marks. A mare had stood here, rested here, maybe hoped here. The foal stepped inside then, limping slightly but determined. He moved straight to that corner and stopped. His head lowered. His breathing slowed. The rancher closed his eyes. This was where she'd been trying to go. Not safety. Not water. Home. Someone had once cared for her here. Fed her. Sheltered her. Maybe raised her from a filly. And when the land dried up, or the people left, or life took its turn, the place was abandoned. But the mare remembered. And when she could no longer go on, she tried to bring her foal back to the only place she'd ever known to be safe. The rancher stood slowly, chest tight. Out here, memory could be as powerful as instinct. He noticed something else then, etched faintly into one of the remaining posts. Letters, barely legible. A name. He traced it with his finger, the grooves worn smooth by time. Someone had loved this place once. Someone had loved these horses. The foal let out a quiet whinny, soft and unsure. It echoed briefly off the walls, then faded. The rancher knelt beside him again. "She did her best," he said. "She really did." The foal pressed closer, his shoulder against the rancher's knee. It wasn't a demand. It was trust. The rancher stayed like that for a long moment, letting the truth settle. This wasn't just a rescue waiting to happen. It was a promise waiting to be answered. He stood, decision made. "We're not leaving you like this," he said firmly. "Not here. Not today." He led the foal back outside, the light brighter now, the wind warmer. The old homestead stood silent behind them, its job finally finished. The mare had brought her foal as far as she could. The rest of the journey would belong to someone else. The rancher mounted his horse, keeping the pace slow. The foal followed willingly now, no longer checking behind him every few steps. The trail ahead felt different, lighter, somehow. But as they started down toward the open range again, the rancher knew the hardest part was still ahead. Saving a life was one thing. Living with the story behind it was another. The journey back felt longer than the ride out. Not because the distance had changed, but because everything else had. The rancher kept his horse at a slow, measured walk, constantly glancing back to make sure the foal was still following. He was always a few steps behind now, close enough to matter, far enough to choose it for himself. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the land. The wind softened, as if the range itself had decided to give them a break. They reached water just as the light began to turn gold. A shallow creek cut through the land, narrow but clear. The rancher dismounted quickly, kneeling to splash water toward the foal. He didn't rush him. Thirst made fools of even the strongest animals. The foal approached slowly, sniffed the surface, then drank. Not desperately, carefully, like he'd learned the cost of overdoing anything. The rancher watched in silence, arms resting on his knees. "You're tougher than you look," he said quietly. After the foal drank, he stood there for a moment, then surprised the rancher by lowering himself to the ground. Not collapsing, choosing to rest. The rancher's chest tightened again. That trust, the kind that forms without words, was rare. And once given, it changed things. They stayed there until dusk, the land settling around them. Coyotes called in the distance. The rancher built a small fire, more for comfort than necessity. He tore a strip of cloth from his saddle blanket and gently wrapped the foal's swollen joint, improvising the best he could. The foal didn't resist. He watched, learned. The rancher realized then how closely those dark eyes followed his every move. Not with fear, with attention, like the foal was memorizing him. "Guess it's just us tonight," the rancher said. The foal flicked an ear, as if acknowledging the statement. Morning came pale and cool. The foal was on his feet before the rancher stirred, standing nearby, waiting. The rancher smiled despite himself. "You're not going anywhere without me now, are you?" They moved at first light, heading toward the ranch. Each step was a small negotiation. Pace, distance, patience. The rancher adjusted without thinking, slowing when the foal lagged, stopping when he needed rest. Somewhere along the way, the foal stopped limping as much. Not healed, but trying. By midday, the ranch buildings came into view. Weathered wood, open corrals, the quiet order of a place shaped by routine and care. The foal stopped when he saw them, ears swiveling, uncertain. The rancher dismounted and walked ahead, leaving his horse behind. "It's all right," he said softly. "You're safe." The foal hesitated, then followed. The rancher settled him into a small, shaded pen away from the others. Fresh water, soft hay, space. The foal stood there for a long moment, unsure what to do with such abundance. Then he ate. The rancher leaned against the fence, watching, feeling something unfamiliar settle into his bones. Not pride, not relief, responsibility. Days turned into weeks. The foal healed slowly. The swelling eased. Strength returned in quiet increments. The rancher worked around him, talked to him, sometimes sat in the pen without saying a word. The foal grew used to the sound of his boots, to his shadow, to his presence. And then one morning, without warning, the foal trotted toward him. Not away, toward. The rancher laughed, a short, surprised sound. "Well, I'll be." From that day on, the bond deepened. Not forced, not trained, chosen. The rancher never named him right away. Names carried weight. They deserved time. Sometimes, late in the evenings, the rancher would catch the foal standing at the far end of the pen, staring toward the open range, toward the trail. But he never tried to leave. He'd look back at the rancher instead. as if to say, I remember, but I'm here. One evening, the rancher finally spoke the name aloud. A simple one, earned, not given. The foal lifted his head, ears forward. It fit. The rancher realized then that the West had changed him again. Not with force, not with loss, but with trust. Because sometimes the strongest bonds aren't forged in storms or battles or grand moments. Sometimes they're forged in silence, between a man who chose not to walk away and a foal who refused to be left behind. The West had a way of reshaping people without asking permission. It didn't announce the lesson. It didn't soften the edges. It simply waited, patient as stone, until a moment arrived that forced a man to see himself clearly. For the rancher, that moment didn't come in a storm or a showdown or some dramatic test of strength. It came quietly. It came every morning when he stepped out of his cabin and saw the foal waiting by the fence. At first, the rancher told himself this was temporary. He'd heal the leg, put weight back on the ribs, then find a good home. That was the sensible thing, the practical thing, the kind of decision the West respected. But the days had a way of unraveling that plan. The foal grew stronger, yes, but he also grew steadier. He learned the rhythms of the ranch. When the sun crested the ridge, when the feed buckets rattled, when the wind shifted just before evening. He followed the rancher during chores, not underfoot, but close enough to be included, like he was claiming a place. And the rancher, well, he started talking to him more than he realized. Not big conversations, just passing thoughts, observations about the weather, memories he hadn't meant to dust off, things he'd never bothered saying out loud before. The foal listened. Maybe he didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone, the weight behind them. One afternoon, a neighbor stopped by, an old hand who'd ridden this land almost as long as the rancher had. He leaned on the fence, eyes narrowing as he watched the foal move across the pen. Where'd you get him? The man asked. Found him on the trail, the rancher replied. The neighbor nodded slowly. He's lucky. The rancher almost corrected him, almost said something about luck having nothing to do with it, about a mare who'd walk herself to the edge of everything for her foal, about a trail that refused to let a story disappear. But he didn't. Some truths weren't meant to be explained. That evening, the rancher rode out alone for the first time in weeks. He followed the familiar path, not out of duty, but out of something closer to respect. When he reached the place where the foal had first appeared, he stopped. The land looked the same, but it wasn't. He dismounted and stood there, hat in hand, listening to the wind. He thought about how easily he could have ridden past that day, how many times he probably had before. The West didn't change. Men did. When he returned, the foal was waiting by the fence, ears forward, body relaxed. No hesitation, no doubt. The rancher smiled. Yeah, he said softly. I figured you'd be here. As the seasons turned, the foal became a young horse. The limp faded into memory. Strength filled out his frame. He ran now, really ran, across the pasture, mane lifting in the wind like he'd finally learned what freedom felt like. But he always came back. That's what struck the rancher most. Freedom didn't pull him away. It anchored him. One night, under a sky heavy with stars, the rancher sat on the fence and thought about the homestead again, about the name carved into the post, about people who loved this land enough to leave their mark on it, even knowing it wouldn't last forever. He realized then that the West wasn't just a place. It was a chain of hands passing something forward. Care, responsibility, memory. The rancher had inherited that chain without realizing it. The foal, no, the horse now, stepped up beside him, breathing steady, familiar. The rancher reached out and rested his hand against the warm neck. You weren't just following a trail, were you? He said quietly. You were bringing something with you. The horse flicked an ear. Maybe that was answer enough. Years later, folks would ask about him, about the horse who never spooked, who stayed calm when others panicked, who seemed to understand more than he should. The rancher would just shrug. He knows where he belongs, he'd say, and that was the truth. Because in saving that foal, the rancher hadn't just changed a life. He'd been reminded of his own, that some bonds don't begin with choice, but they last because of it, that the West doesn't always test you with loss. Sometimes it offers you trust instead. And if you're willing to accept it, it changes you forever.